everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Northwest Stadium, getting set for the Eagles' afternoon matchup against the Washington Commanders. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I ventured the trip down 95 this morning, and it wasn't too bad. So, I don't have a lot of complaints. I'm going to stay positive today. I maybe have been on record complaining about this stadium a few times in the past, but new name, I'm going to come at it with a new perspective. So, yeah, I'm doing well. I'm excited for the show, excited for the game.
New name, new chapter. Love that sense of positivity, EJ. Always good to have that. As always, everyone watching, you can be a part of our conversation. Head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. If you're not already there, leave us a question, a comment, whatever is on your mind. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll answer some of those questions that you've had later in our show today. So we look forward to seeing you over there. All right, EJ, let us get into it. We don't have a whole lot to discuss in terms of the health report, in terms of the health of this team. A.J. Brown is in for today's game. So is Nick Dickerson. The two of them have been dealing with knee injuries this week. A.J. Brown and Landon Dickerson both were limited participants in practice on Thursday and Friday. However, they were removed from the injury report at the end of the week, had no status designation going into today's game. So they are healthy, ready to go. Out for today's game is Britton Covey, missing his third straight game due to a neck injury. And Bryce Huff remains on IR. His 21-day practice window was opened earlier this week. He practiced all 3 days, I believe in a limited capacity, as he still works his way back from this wrist surgery that he had several weeks ago. So we will see if he is able to go next week against the Dallas Cowboys, but good to see him back out there getting back into action. EJ, when you consider the fact that, listen, the Eagles are still very much in the mix for the top seed in the NFC. They're duking it out. They have an opportunity today to clinch the NFC East, which would, again, just be big for them to be able to do it at this point. It's less of a question of will it happen. It's more of a question when it will happen. But that said, with the NFC still on the line, and you look over at the Detroit Lions, who are dealing with lots and lots of injuries, have lots of players on injured reserve, how likely is it, do you think, that the Eagles could nab that top seed?
Yeah, they have a really good chance. A couple of weeks ago, if you had asked me, I would have probably said that I didn't like their chances of being able to overtake the Lions. But honestly, that was accounting for the Ravens game and the Commanders game and the Steelers game, excuse me. So, the fact that they came out of that stretch able to beat both the Ravens and the Steelers. If you look at their last three games, obviously they're all divisional games, and I think it's a necessary caveat that we're going to say a couple of times during the show that division games, especially the second division game, they do sometimes take on a weird complexion. It's not always how you expect the game to go. They always seem closer than it might be, than it might suggest between the two teams on paper. But that said, the Eagles have the easiest slate out of in these final 3 weeks. When you look at the Vikings schedule and the Lions schedule, they're quality opponents. The Lions and the Vikings play each other. So yeah, the Eagles need the Vikings and the Lions to lose one of their final 3 games. Again, they play each other, so that will factor in. One of them is going to lose. Eagles fan rooting guide for today. The Lions are at the Bears at 1:00 today. Obviously the Bears don't have the best record, but I'm curious to see how the Lions fare in a cold environment on the road against a team that is, I would say the Bears are maybe not quite plucky at this point in the year, but still I think it might be an interesting game. Again, it's a division game. And then the Vikings are at the Seattle Seahawks at 4:00. So once this game is wrapped up, Eagles fans can go tune into that one and root against the Vikings, because I think probably the best way that this could fall is that the Vikings lose a game this week. They maybe lose to Seattle, and then in the regular season finale, when they play the Lions, they could overtake them. So yeah, like I said, I think the Eagles have some pathways. I think that they are really in the hunt, which I maybe wouldn't have said a couple of weeks ago.
No shortage of interesting football happening in the next few weeks. It'll be interesting to see how everything shapes up. All right, for the Commanders, also an overwhelmingly healthy team at the moment. Tight end Zach Ertz is active for today's game after he dealt with a shoulder injury and also was working through concussion protocol throughout the week. Same thing for Jeremy Chin. He is active after also getting through concussion protocol. So 2 impact players there. One player that the Eagles know very he gets to welcome the Eagles on his own turf here. All right, let's transition into our latest headline segment. Lots of storylines going into today's game, especially with the Eagles passing game coming off of a really strong performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. However, there is a new face in the Washington Commanders secondary that the Eagles did not see the last time they faced off against the Commanders in Marshon Lattimore. He did not play week 3 with the New Orleans Saints when he was previously on that team, got traded leading up to the trade deadline. Now he is in DC. He did not play until last week, and he has so far really had a good season for the Commanders. Or at least he's off to a really good start. He has been targeted 14 times in 8 games this year, and he has only allowed 8 catches for 83 yards, no touchdowns, according to Pro Football Focus. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are well acquainted with the talent of Lattimore. He last faced the two of those receivers in 2022, late in the season. He held A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to 5 receptions for 44 yards and ultimately had a pick 6 to seal the win for the Saints. When you look at the success that the Eagles passing game had last week and now projecting it into today's game with this bolstered secondary, do you feel like the Eagles can have as much success through the air as they did against the Steelers?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see. I think that the biggest difference, obviously personnel aside, is that Washington doesn't quite play the same exact way that the Steelers do. I think that they're a little bit more complex on defense, a little bit more varied in their approach. Not to take anything away from how the Eagles passing game performed against Pittsburgh, but I think we even talked about in the lead up to the game that Pittsburgh played in a way that kind of favors what the Eagles want to do. In terms of they play a lot of single high coverage, a lot of man coverage. They're pretty straightforward. I think that they kind of have an approach that's similar to what the Eagles do offensively, which is that we do what we do and we know that we're really good at it, so it works. I think, again, not taking credit away from what the Eagles did. Obviously, they still had to win one-on-one matchups. Jalen Hurts still had to be decisive with the ball. I think there were a lot of encouraging signs, but I am curious to see if they can kind of string this together, kind of stay ahead of opposing defensive coordinators, as teams start to adjust to some of the things, some of the wrinkles that we saw last week. So it's a big question. When I say I'm overly confident in it, still no. I think that we've had a long track record of seeing this this passing game kind of struggle against varied looks, and I am just very curious to, like I said, see if they can stay ahead of Dan Quinn today. Be able to kind of continue to implement wrinkles to stay ahead of those defensive coaches.
Well, maybe it will be a big game for Saquon Barkley on the ground. It was last time in Week 11 when the Eagles took on the Commanders. He helped spark their comeback victory, had a pair of explosive touchdown runs. In total, he had 26 carries for 146 yards, those 2 touchdowns. Plus, he had a pretty productive day through the air, 2 receptions for 52 yards. When you look at Barkley's pace right now in catching Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing yards record, where all eyes are on that right now, he would need to average 139 rushing yards in each of the next 3 games, which is a pretty steep number, but certainly for Saquon Barkley, not out of the realm of conversation. How likely is it that he could have a standout performance today and inch closer to breaking that record?
Yeah, this is one of the things I'm most interested in about this rematch is the Eagles did not run the ball very well in the first half against the Commanders last time these two teams played, but in the second half they started to implement more gap scheme runs that really took advantage of Washington's aggressiveness up front. I think that might be the key to the game, honestly, is do the Eagles take those, start to call those runs early in this game? Obviously they save some of those types of runs, for the second half of games when they really want to kind of bleed the clock, kind of take advantage. It's almost like a change up that they can use. I'm curious to see if they use it, from the out, from the very beginning of the game, kind of take advantage of the fact that Washington can get, their defensive linemen upfield, they're very aggressive front, kind of not similar to the Eagles where you've got defensive linemen accounting for 2 gaps. It's 1 gap. They just shoot up the 1 gap. So, does Washington adjust from that game, because of the way that the second half went? Or, again, do the Eagles try and test that early? So I think if Washington doesn't adjust, it's not necessarily easy to change that mid-season. It's almost like a philosophy on what you want your defensive line to do. If Washington is slow to adjust to, those gap scheme runs, I think Saquon Barkley could have a really big day today. I think, we saw how effective they were in the second half of the first meeting. So, yeah, I mean, the 139 yard pace, that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for him to keep that up, especially if the Eagles kind of know their seeding in the final week of the regular season. So I'm not sure if, the record's really going to be something that he's going to have a chance at, but I think he could, I think he could definitely get that today at the very least. So, yeah.
The Commanders have a lot on their plate in terms of the Eagles' offensive weapons, but on the other side, the Commanders also have a pretty talented receiver of their own in Terry McLaurin. He had a really quiet day the last time the Eagles faced the Commanders. Quinyon Mitchell was a big reason why he aligned opposite McLaurin on 20 of his 25 routes, according to Next Gen Stats. Ultimately, McLaurin only finished with 1 reception for 10 yards. Mitchell wasn't targeted at all. He was not targeted. He did not allow a reception that night at all, regardless of who he was going up against in coverage. Now, you would think that the Commanders are probably telling Terry McLaurin in meetings this week, we want to get the ball in your hands. That can't happen again. And he has been more involved in the offense as the weeks have progressed since week 11, the last time the Eagles and the Commanders played each other. And he's had a lot of success. I believe he has had at least a touchdown in each of his last 3 games, 2 touchdowns in each of his last 2 games. What is the key to limiting his impact in today's game?
For Quinyon Mitchell, I think it's just to continue to do what he's been doing all season. You know, the reason that teams aren't throwing at him very often is because he's been very good in coverage. You know, he's been sticky in coverage. He takes guys away. He kind of, blankets number 1 receivers, number 2 receivers, whatever he ends up seeing. I think for him, this might be one of those games where he is going to get tested, even if he is in solid coverage, even if he is, in good position. I think that Jaden Daniels might force it to Terry McLaurin a little bit more this game. I'm sure they watched that film, from the Thursday night game and said, man, we should have just kind of tried to force the issue a little bit more to, our main guy in the passing game. I think that they might do that today. And if that is the case, Quinyon Mitchell, the key is going to be don't panic when the ball's in the air, make plays on the ball. We've seen him make plays on the ball this season. Obviously, he doesn't have an interception yet. This could be the game. This could be the game where he ends up getting those targets, where he gets the opportunity to make plays on the ball. Again, it's even his ball production in college is really good. We just haven't seen him thrown. The teams have not tested him, which is, I've said it on the show a bunch of times. It's very rare for a rookie to not get tested by opposing offenses. It could be today. If he's a matchup against Terry McLaurin a lot. The other part of this that I don't want to tease too much, but maybe on the other side of the fan zone we'll talk about is I think Terry McLaurin might line up in some different areas to try and get away from Quinyon Mitchell, which, again, that's high praise for a rookie.
I wonder where he might line up. Tune in just a few minutes. Maybe we'll tell you. EJ, I do want to follow up on this too, because I think this is something that has been on my mind. Quinyon Mitchell is in the discussion for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Jared Verse of the Los Angeles Rams, the defensive end, is probably the one that is giving him the biggest run for his money at this point in the season. The big thing that Mitchell is lacking right now, as you already mentioned, is an interception on his resume, with yet another standout performance against one of the top receivers in the league in McLaurin. If he were to come down with a reception today, how much do you think that would boost his campaign for Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Oh, it would definitely. Honestly, you might even be able to say it would cement it. I mean, Jared Verse has had a good year, but I just looked it up. He has 4.5 sacks. That's not world-beating numbers. I mean, Nolan Smith has 5 or 6 at this point in the season. I think it's I know young edge rushers are slow to catch up to speed, and I'm not saying that he hasn't a great year, but I think what Quinyon has done has been more impressive. I think, in the modern NFL, the modern day, to just not be giving up big plays down the field. Rookie cornerbacks are not usually this good. I think even though he doesn't have the interceptions, I think that the metrics, the advanced numbers that you can look at for Quinyon really tell the story of how dominant he's been this year. I think a pick or 2 would definitely solidify his claim. I think he might win it even without the interception or without the ball production, because he's just been so good. The teams aren't throwing at him like we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. Well, Quinyon doesn't care, apparently. We spoke to him earlier this week, and he said he is tuning out all of the buzz around him, especially as it relates to Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's something that we get to talk about. He's just focused on winning a Super Bowl. One day
just
at a time.
Super Bowl. Yeah, just a Super Bowl. Real casual.
No big deal. All right, everyone. Let's transition into the fan zone. Take some of your questions and comments. Thank all of you for being over there on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Let's take this one first from Super Unoriginal. I would be certain that your question is very original, though. I think last week against the Steelers was a template for how the Eagles play against the Commanders. Get the lead and eat up the clock. The Eagles dominated the time of possession game, especially at the end of the game with that 10.5-minute, 21-play drive of just the situational kitchen sink, just about everything. They were backed up, a couple conversions on 3rd and long, and then eventually they get into 4-minute mode and then kneeling it out at the end of the game. Obviously, that the longer you possess the ball, usually good things happen as far as football is concerned. How likely is it that the Eagles could duplicate a similar performance and approach against the Commanders?
Situational kitchen sink. I like that. That's a very good phrase there. I think it is likely. I think that this is the formula for the Eagles. The early leads have been something that we haven't seen a lot from them. They have not gotten off to quick starts, but I've said it before. Like, this is a team that is built to get the lead early, rush the passer, and run the ball and kind of bleed out a game. Choke out a game, and that's what they've been able to do. Against the Steelers, that was one of the best drives I think I've seen. The Eagles have had a lot of really impressive 4-minute drives, but that one, like you mentioned, like, there are 3rd and longs in there that, like, there was a 3rd and 22 that they had to convert on, and you're watching it and it's like, I just don't know how they made so many timely plays. Just kind of, like I said, just like, you watch most football games and it's like there's 10 minutes left and the team's up, 2 scores, and it's like, this game is not over. And with the Eagles, they get the ball back and it's like, yeah, no, this is done. It's over. Like, they're just gonna ride this out and they're gonna go and celebrate. So it's really like one of this team's superpowers. I would say it kind of is like a trump card in the fourth quarter that they can pull out. And yeah, I think that is, especially in a game like this, it's cold out there. I think being able to grind it out in the fourth quarter is going to be important for them.
Thank you so much. Super unoriginal, I will say. Very original comment. Let's take this one from M. Galante. They say, road division games are the hardest to win. I expect both teams to play well on offense and the Eagles defense to make more plays than the Commanders defense for a nail-biting win. This Eagles defense, week in, week out, has been the most consistent unit for this Eagles team as a whole. I think, as we've said throughout the season, EJ, if you told us going into the season that the Eagles would be the number 1 defense in the league with a new defensive coordinator, with so many new unproven starters out there on the field, I don't think we would have believed you. But alas, here they are, and they're performing really well. Do you feel like the defense could be the difference in today's game?
I do. I don't want to spoil too much of my prediction, but I think that, this game will have the makings of a tight, maybe, sluggish or slugfest type of game. Again, Washington hasn't necessarily been great against, teams with winning records, but I think this could be a tight game that comes down to, timely stops from the defense. And that's been the thing about this Eagles defense. They don't have the best turnover production. They don't have the most sacks. They haven't been, led by like a pressure rate, kind of like that 22 team was just like so dominant in the pass rush. But I think what they're really good at is that they just make timely tackles and they make timely stops. They are able to get off the field when they need to, and that is really kind of the difference for them. It's like all 11 are playing very well together. It's definitely a credit to Vic Fangio. When you looked at this defense going into the year, it was definitely a rebuilding group, a lot of young players, and he's really been able to get the most out of those guys and just develop them at a very quick rate. So I think this one could come down to the defense. I think a lot of this year, maybe that's another one of our comments. And a lot of this year might come down to whether the defense can keep this level of play up.
Yeah, well, let's stay on this topic here. We've got this comment here from Pescuzzo. They say, I think the defense holds the key to the Eagles making it to the Super Bowl. The offense has been inconsistent this year. I think elements of the Eagles offense have been inconsistent, specifically the passing game. I feel like the Eagles have found, or at least they've proven, that they can win in different ways on offense, or at least lend to the win in different ways. And particularly in the run game, last week we saw that the passing game was able to step up against the Steelers. Still, the defense has been its most consistent all-around unit on this Eagles team. Is that sustainable, though, EJ? Like, when the Eagles, if and when the Eagles make their way to the Super Bowl, could that win them the big game if the Eagles' offense is still a little bit inconsistent in areas and the defense remains as dominant as they have been all season long?
Yeah, I don't know if you can rely on them to be as dominant as they have been necessarily. Once you're in the playoffs, I know that the Eagles have played some good offenses last couple of weeks. Even that Bengals win sticks out as like a time where the defense was making, like I said, timely stops earlier. It's like, but when you're in the playoffs, like, you're playing such good offenses, they're in such a good rhythm. I do think the offense is going to have to be able to show up. I don't think you're going to win games. Maybe I'll eat these words. I don't think you're going to win games 17-14, in the bigger games, against some of the best offenses in the league. So I think that, like, you could make an argument that they could be complementary, the run game kind of complementing the defense. And maybe if the passing game is inconsistent or not showing up for a game, you can kind of ride it out and grind out a result that way. But yeah, I do think that in order to beat the best teams, you need all elements to be firing. I think that the team would agree with that. That's why they have been so critical of the passing game in the last couple of weeks. I think they know that there are going to be moments where it needs to be relied on. So I think it's going to have to be a whole team thing. But I do think the fact this defense has been playing so well kind of gives them more avenues to win. I think that's important.
We'll revisit that take at the end of the playoffs. We'll see how far the Eagles get and how well that take aged. Thank you, everyone, so much for your comments. Let's transition into our player picks. We've discussed plenty of players throughout today's show, lots of interesting storylines. However, EJ, if you had to pick one player that you're most intrigued by going into this matchup, who would it be?
Yeah, I teased it on the other side of fan zone, and I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean. I think Washington is going to try to find ways to get the ball into Terry McLaurin's hands. I think they're going to look at, the previous game, and they're going to say part of the reason we didn't have success is because he got taken out of the game. If you want your number one receiver to get involved, I mean, we've seen the Eagles do it. You put him in the slot. You give him some different alignments. You're trying to get him favorable matchups. And fortunately for the Eagles, they have a very good answer to that. And if the Commanders put Terry McLaurin in the slot a lot this game, I think Cooper DeJean is he's proven that he can hold up against number one receivers who go in there and try and, again, take advantage of that matchup. So, we've seen Cooper DeJean have a couple of, I guess it was really just Adam Thielen. He struggled against Adam Thielen. But I think the track record of him going against the Rams duo of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, whether it's Jamar Chase from earlier in the season, we've seen him have really good games against, top receivers in the NFL coming into the slot to face off against them. So, yeah, I think the Eagles can feel next thing, if they're going to start trying to test, whether or not Terry McLaurin can, find more opportunities to get the ball out of the slot.
Mm-hmm. After that was the Panthers game, DeJean went in his matchup against Adam Thielen, said he was not physical enough in that matchup. So we'll see if he is able to respond well, if the Commanders end up putting Terry McLaurin in the slot a little bit more frequently, and if he is able to maintain that level of physicality that we have really come to expect from him. That was an anomaly in that game in particular. My player to watch in today's game, I am going with a certain Eagles edge rusher in Josh Sweat. He leads the team in sacks right now, and I think he has had a very consistent year after last season when we saw him essentially be super productive the first half of the season, 6.5 sacks, and then go cold for the remainder of the season, which really coincided with the Eagles' struggles at the end of the season as an entire defense, really as an entire team. So this time around, I think Sweat and his performance is going to be crucial in trying to limit this passing attack that the Commanders have, led by Jaden Daniels. Daniels has recorded the 5th highest sack rate while under pressure, according to Next Gen Stats. And in Week 11, when the Eagles and the Commanders last faced each other, Daniels, he was sacked on 3 of his 7 pressure dropbacks, which is his highest sack rate under pressure in a game this season. So as long as the Eagles can keep generating that pressure, keep getting home to Josh Daniels, they'll have a good opportunity to potentially bring him down and really disrupt the Commanders' rhythm, get them out of a flow. So I think Josh Sweat could play a big role in that. I think he's been more than just productive again, rushing the passer. I think he's also been good dropping into coverage when he's asked to, when Vic Fangio asks him to, when he is going up against the run. I think he has been pretty sound up front in setting the edge and making the tackle when need be. So all around, I would say so far it's been a good rebound year for him. He's still his season high was in 2022. He had 11 sacks that year, so he's a little bit away from that. But I think he's currently on pace to try to get there. So we'll see if he is able to do that by the end of the season. All right, EJ, it is time to take out the crystal ball and to make your prediction for today's game. You already kind of alluded to it. You think it's going to be a little bit of a slugfest, a close game. What is your final score and who comes out on top?
Let me start off by saying I was at a holiday party last night, and I was getting a little bit of a flack from some family members about my record predicting games this year. I want to say it's been hard for everybody. It hasn't just been hard for me. This Eagles team has been hard to pin down at certain points in the season, and I will not be discouraged. I am going to continue to predict what I think is going to happen, and if I'm right, I'm right, and if I'm wrong, then I'm not going to mention that as much. So, I have the Eagles winning this game 23-20. I think they are obviously the more talented team on paper. And I think that there is some blowout potential just because, again, like Washington is 0-4 against teams with winning records. They're the only team in the NFL who has a winning record that has not beaten a team with a winning record. So I am not necessarily buying that Washington can hang in games against, so I wouldn't say superior opponents, but teams with, winning records, I would say. But that said, second division game, I've seen enough of these NFC East battles to know that these games can sometimes get a little weird. They can sometimes get a little strange, especially this point in the season. Obviously, the Eagles are on a really good winning streak. I'm a little curious to wonder. I'm wondering if there is going to be a slip up at some point. Maybe you could argue the Panthers game was that slip up, but yeah, I think in general, I think the Eagles should be able to figure out a way to win this game, even if it is tight, even if it is sloppy, even if there are moments where it doesn't feel like they're dominating the game. I think they'll have chances to win the game, and I think that they will be able to take those chances. So yeah, I 23-20. I think it'll be a little bit lower scoring. I could see Saquon Barkley having a big day, and I could see the defense kind of continuing to be the dominant group that they've been for most of the season.
Mm-hmm. I am also going with the Eagles, however, by a little bit bigger of a margin, 28-23. I think, again, on paper, this is the better team. The Eagles are the better team, and if Barkley can be as productive as he has been in recent weeks, and especially against the Commanders the last time the two teams faced, it doesn't necessarily matter if the Commanders, in my mind, if the Commanders go into this game thinking, okay, this is what they did against us last time on the ground, this is how we're going to respond. The Eagles have always found a way to dictate the run and make it happen. And I think that could happen once again in today's game. I am curious, as you mentioned, will they be able to sustain that success early in the game, or is it going to come down to a closer type performance once again from Barkley? He is shown to be capable week in and week out of coming up with that performance. He's just been dominant in the second half. But I think they would benefit from a strong start as they did against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then, try to salt the game away as they did last week. That if they could replicate another 21-play drive, I'm not sure if that'll happen. But again, I think they are more than capable of beating this team, even if there's a little bit of weirdness in the rematch this season. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. Just as a reminder, you can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Gameday if you're not already there. We will be commenting in real time throughout the game, answering your questions, so we look forward to seeing you soon. You can also, if you would like to listen to our colleague Jeff McClain, his podcast had a new episode this week. You can keep up with his coverage on Uncovering the Birds from Jeff McClain. New episodes every week, so you can listen to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to inquirer.com/podcasts. Once again, that is all for today, everyone. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.